Here's Casey Neistat. Here's the ultimate vlogger. He's rocking a wide angle. Things are distorted. There's some fisheye going on. He's not super close to the camera, but his face looks weird. And the closer he gets to the camera, the more distorted his face is, because that's what, super wide angle lenses do. It's a whole thing. Movies do it too. So, there's a couple things that happens when you're dealing with extreme wide angles. Here's The Revenant with Mr. DiCaprio. And the first thing is, you see more of the environment. You can see sort of maybe 180 degrees depending on how wide the lens is. But that's interesting, but that's not quite as interesting as what is psychologically happening, because whether or not you realize it consciously, because the camera is inches away from Leonardo DiCaprio's face, I believe this is Tom Hardy's face, you sort of pick up on that, and you realize that if you were in this scene, which presumably you are as the audience, you're standing inches away from DiCaprio, which is, it's unnerving, but it's weirdly intimate. And, in other situations where people are really far away, they seem extra far away, even though maybe linearly they're only like 10 feet away. That's the other sort of advantage of wide angle lenses, is how far away the character is from the camera itself really dictates what's going on. But again, the camera is maybe inches away from one of his hands, and you can feel it. You can feel how close you are to this character. Oftentimes it's played for distortion. It can also be played for intimacy. Casey Neistat, it humanizes him. It makes him a regular dude. This is why it works so well on YouTube, for instance. I tend to use a lot of wide angles when I'm doing sort of talking head stuff on YouTube, because because you're so close physically to the person, because you sort of do understand inherently, even if you don't know where the camera is sitting, you're the camera. So, you're literally within a handshake of Casey Neistat, and that's such an incredible effect. Tree of Life also, again, I just want to scrub through this footage a little bit because it does some interesting stuff too. It's also where the camera is sitting, and so if the camera is above eye level looking down, that's one perspective. If the camera is below eye level looking up, that's sort of regular eye level. Here's a little bit below eye level. That, there's different things. Casey Neistat is usually straight on, which is pretty good. He does put himself a little bit higher than the center line often, but not always. It's just, it's how he works. Here's the whole frame. There's a lot going on. It's super fun. It's, to me, where I came up, it was always skate videos, but the wide angle lenses, I do feel like they're sort of going out of fashion a little bit right now, just because we've reached maximum wide angle lenses. But then I thought about it. There was a TV show years ago, sort of in the era of skate videos, that was also wide angle lenses. It's British. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Peepshow, with Mark and Jeremy. There's Jeremy right there, and that's Super Hands. Where's Mark? Jeremy again. Wow, a lot of Jeremy in this. There's Mark. There's my guy Mark. And so, on first glance, if you weren't really paying attention, this looks like a regular sort of kitchen, sort of living room scene, and Mark is sort of where he needs to be. But the more you look at it, you realize you can see really far. You can see almost 180 degrees, and this box and frame is gigantic. And once you sort of mentally place where it is, the camera is basically right up against this box. There's also a reverse shot to this with Sophie, his wife/girlfriend, depending on what season you're on. And again, here's the box. And so again, literally the camera is right in front of Sophie. So you have this weird intimacy, but you also have this sort of optical illusion of the flat being much bigger than it actually is, because there's, the artificial depth that this wide angle is creating. It's wild. Peepshow really did it as a gimmick, because part of their thing is it's from the point of view of the character. And so when Mark is looking at Sophie, we're literally sitting where Mark is sitting. It's sort of the direct the character point of view, and that's how the whole show is. If somebody's talking to somebody, the exchange is going to be very much, he's looking this way, and then the camera is going to be where he's sitting. It's not every show, and I wouldn't say it's dated, but it's definitely a weird look. It's definitely not the look of a regular sitcom. It's not the look of like a mockumentary by any means, or The Office, because you got people going right down the barrel. It's very intense. It's kind of theater-esque, honestly, if I would call it anything. But it really plays for the show. I would like to see other shows do this because it's a really interesting setup, but it's a lot to deal with. I might call this exhausting to look at, honestly, because you're having to look everywhere because you can see so much more. You don't get the sort of the broad news broadcaster, just sort of regular framing that you normally would. This is pretty close, actually. This is very film school, where this is the establishing shot of the couch, but then it goes way in. Yeah, so I enjoy wide angles. Time and place, and again, Peepshow I think does a really good job of justifying why they're doing these crazy wide angles, which is it's sort of the point of view of the characters exchanging. Again, this is not a flattering look. Her face is all distorted based on the lens, but it sells because it's going to somebody's point of view, and then it's going to her point of view and talking to him. Yeah, it's a whole thing. So, I wouldn't say stay away from wide angles, but I think a good cultural reference, a good visual reference for what you can do with wide angles and what you can't is Peepshow, because they had so many seasons to sort of figure out how to make it work, because blocking wise, lighting wise, it's basically a single camera sitcom. It's a very traditional sitcom, but because of the way it's shot, because everything is so backed up, because the camera is usually sitting in the laps of the main characters, you have this really weird perspective that most traditional shows aren't just willing to do because it's so ridiculous. So I would never consider Peepshow to have the sort of visual artistic value of something much more aggressively visual, like again the Revenant or Tree of Life, or even the way Casey Neistat uses it, because Casey, it's part of his storytelling. He likes to put the camera on stuff. That's his whole thing. He puts it on a skateboard and rolls a skateboard to him. But I think Casey Neistat's angle on the wide angle is actually a lot more close to how Peepshow uses it, where Casey understands that the camera is the audience, is another character in the conversation, and he treats it as such. And again, the Peepshow people, they're doing it right down the barrel, just like he is, for narrative versus sort of an artificial narrative, which is this is my life in a day. Very similar results, and just very similar styles once you actually really look at it, which is crazy that two people, continents away. I'm not sure Casey Neistat has ever heard of Peepshow. I don't know if these guys have ever heard of Casey Neistat. Obviously, Peepshow ended long before Casey Neistat really came onto the scene, but I thought it was fascinating. I hadn't seen anybody really talk about wide angle lenses in this way, in sort of a more practical sense, because everybody likes the abstract stuff. And once you know what you're dealing with lenses and visuals, beautiful abstract shots can be had. But I just feel like TV especially, and TV that's doing some different things, doesn't necessarily get the attention it deserves. And so here's an example of a show that I don't necessarily would call on first glance beautiful, that is Peepshow, but the more I look at it, the more I really appreciate it for what it is, and the fact that they really went for it on trying to make this sort of subjective point of view of the characters talking to each other, try to make it work. And I think I would like to see more shows and more movies do it this way, because I think it's fun. What do you guys think? Like, share, subscribe. Let me know. I'll catch you next time.